We're talking about me, self, and I. The self is the soul, you. Soul is talking to soul. You, soul, come in this world and play a character. We're going to call that the me. But who really are you? As we mentioned before, in order to live a purposeful, meaningful life, a soulful life, you need to be you, totally you. To live you is to live your purpose. But who really are you? What is the soul? So in order to understand the soul, we have to go now to the I. Now what I'm about to share with you is pretty radical, because when we say the I, we're talking about God. Now this is really radical. You know, there's a cute little story about a little boy, and he's drawing this picture. Teacher comes up to him and says, well, what are you drawing? He said, I'm drawing a picture of God. Teacher says, Johnny, nobody knows what God looks like. Well, Johnny says, well, soon they will when I finish this picture. Well, really, what does God look like? So the first Russian astronaut, when he was in outer space, they asked him in ground control, what do you see? And he said, oh, I don't see God. Wait a second, what did he think he'd see? You know, he's in his spaceship, and suddenly in the middle of outer space, two eyes appear with a hand waving, hello, I'm God. What took you so long? You see, the reason why you can't see God, most people think you can't see God because he's too far. The truth is, the reason why you can't see God is the same reason you can't see yourself. You might see a picture of yourself, you might see a mirror reflection, but that's not the you. That's not the you. The same reason you can't see yourself is the same reason you can't see God, because God is the source of all seeing. God is the self of all selves. And so you're a soul playing a character, but you are a part of the soul of all souls, the self of all selves. In fact, Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, said something very fascinating. He said, I simply believe that the soul is not subject to the laws of time and space. Now, we talked about that, but he said, actually, I believe that the soul is part of that which transcends time and space. The truth is that we would agree that there is a soul that transcends all of time and all of space. You, soul, are a part of that soul. Metaphorically, the Kabbalah describes our relationship to God as a relationship between a ray of light and the sun. If God were the sun, we would be a ray of light. Kabbalah also uses other kinds of metaphors. If God were the ocean, you would be a drop in the ocean. Or if God were white light, you'd be one of the colors in the spectrum of that white light. You know, so deep down inside, it's quite an amazing thing. You know, somehow we deeply think that we are important. You know, it's a crazy thing. You know, like this, I heard a astrophysicist once point out that if we were to fill all of Grand Central Station with dust, then one speck of dust would be planet Earth relative to the cosmos. Now, you know, there are billions of people living on this planet, which is really a speck of dust on this planet. That means that each and every one of us is much less than billions of a speck of dust. And yet, somehow, each and every one of us thinks we're important. Somehow we think we're the center of the universe. And so how is it that everything from without tells us we're nothing? What is it within us that tells us we're something, that we're someone? And that's because you are a soul, and you are part of the one self, which is what we call the soul of souls. That's God. And so a soul is a part of God. Each and every one of us is a masterpiece, a piece of the master, a piece of the master soul. I had mentioned earlier on in this course that as a teenager I really loved rock and roll and went to a lot of concerts. And there was a moment in the concert that was my favorite moment that I waited for in that concert. And that was when everybody would light a match. I remember the first time I saw this, I turned around, there were thousands of people in this concert hall. And suddenly I see everybody's lighting a match. Now I know today people hold their cell phones. This is a desecration of rock and roll, but what can I do? In those days, we had to actually light the match, you know. And I didn't have a match. And so I told him, excuse me, you have a match? Yeah, man, I need a match, I need a match. And I got that match and I felt so good. And I tried to understand, later on in my life, like, what was so special about that? And I mentioned earlier on that really in many ways, rock and roll was an escape for me. It was that, give me the Beat Boys and free my soul, I want to get lost in your rock and roll. But actually I didn't get lost. I realized looking back, I found something. Because what I realized later on in my life, that moment was acting out something I deeply wanted in my life and knew was already in my life, but needed to in some way celebrate and become aware of. And that I wanted to be part of something greater than myself. And this is a natural inclination of you as a soul. And why is that? Because you really are part of that which is greater than yourself. There's a longing within us. We all long to belong to something that's beyond just me, just you. And I remember at that concert, there was something about this shared self that we were all together. We were all one. Now, was that God I was looking for? Well, at the time I didn't think so. But, now later on in my life, I think people are pretty surprised when I, as a rabbi, tell them I actually don't believe in God. How's that possible? You don't believe in God? Actually, I'm not the only one. Moses, he didn't believe in God either. Not only did he not believe, he never even heard of God. Because the word G-O-D and everything that comes with it, unfortunately, today, is not what it says in the Torah. The word for that's being translated as God in the Torah is the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, the Hey, which is a word that we are not allowed to pronounce. But that word is referred to as Shema Havaya, which literally means the name of existence. That name, the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, the Hey, literally means existence. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? You see, most people think that if there's a God, then he's an infinite, eternal being in existence. And then you have the atheists that say, look, I don't believe that somewhere over there's some being in existence. Well, you know what? According to Kabbalah, the atheist is right. There is no such thing or being called God in existence, because God is not someone over there. And he's not in existence. Rather, when we say God, we're talking about existence. God isn't in existence. God is existence and infinitely more. Because we have to say infinitely more because we have to realize that everything we say about God will always be relative to us and will always be greater than anything we can conceive. But the important thing is that God is existence. And where are we? We are in existence. God isn't in existence, God is existence, and we are in existence. We are a part of that one self. There are many times in the Torah where it says, I am Yud Hey Vav Hey. What does that really mean? It means I am existence. You exist within me. You are a part of me. We are to God metaphorically like a baby is to the womb of its mother. Now, the baby's not the mother, but the baby exists within the mother. The baby is a part of the mother. The baby cannot exist without the mother. Now, the mother could exist without the baby. I mean, we shouldn't want that, obviously, but the baby is completely dependent on the existence of the mother. So in Kabbalistic tradition, when we say God, and we often say rather the word Hashem, we're referring to the name Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. And there's none but the one. It's become actually quite popular for people in New Age not to use the word God, but use the word universe. The interesting thing is that what they're intuiting is something that's very close to what the Kabbalah teaches. We don't say that God is the universe. We say God is existence. But what this New Age thinking is really intuiting is they are trying to remove themselves from God over there and I'm over here but rather God is the universe in their mind, includes me, and I'm a part of the universe. And actually, the name Yud He Vav He correlates the idea in Judaism called Makomo Shel Olam, that God is, so to speak, the space of the universe. And therefore, not that Torah or Kabbalah is saying that God is the universe, but what New Age is saying is coming much closer to what genuinely Torah was saying, because in our tradition, God is not some infinite eternal being floating somewhere in heaven, somewhere over there. But God is the one. There's none but the one. God is existence. God is the space that we exist in. God is, so to speak, the womb that we exist within. God is one. There's none but the one. But you are someone, some of the one. The Torah records the introductory statement of the Creator at what's referred to as the revelation at Sinai as Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Now that's been translated as I am the Lord your God, which is a sad translation. We need something deeper. We're ready for something deeper. So really, we had learned before that the name Yud He Vav He is referred to as Shema Havaya, which means the name of existence, and that God is not a being in existence. God is existence and infinitely more. And so when at Sinai these words were spoken, I am Yud He Vav He, what that means is I am existence. But the name Yud He Vav He also, our sages teach us, correlates to the word Haya Hoveh Yihiyeh. I am all there ever was, is, and ever will be. And so that's really saying, I am existence. I am all there ever was, ever will be. In other words, there's only one I am. There's only one I am. I am Yud He Vav He Elohecha, the Kabbalah teaches, means I am the soul of your soul. So really, when the Torah describes the revelation of Sinai, what it's describing is that we met the soul of our soul. So how do we understand this? Again, we're trying to understand, who are we? Who are we? Well, so we're getting away from the idea that we thought as children that God is some guy in the sky over there, but really God is our higher self. God is our inner self. Our relationship to God would be very much like the relationship in a tree. Imagine you're looking at a tree and you have all these leaves. Now imagine all those leaves are people. And so two leaves are looking at each other and say, I really don't like you. The answer, well, I don't really like you either. Well, they don't realize that they're connected to the same twig. Okay, so we're part of the same family, but we don't like the family next door. Well, guess what? They're leaves too, and they're connected to a twig, but that twig and your twig are connected to the same branch. Okay, well, so this is our community. Okay, we can't stand the guys on the other side of town. But the other guys on the other side of town, they're part of another branch, that's true, but their branch and your branch connects into the trunk. And that trunk is emanating out of a root. Therefore, when we talk about God, we're talking about the root self. That all other selves, so to speak, all other souls are kind of emanating, unfolding from. Kind of think of it as an upside down tree in terms of our relationship to God. Or think of it in another way, a metaphor of electricity. In this room right now is a refrigerator, a stove, and lights, light fixtures. Now, they're all connected to one self, that's electricity. When electricity flows through the air conditioner, the power of cooling becomes manifest. When the electricity flows through the stove, the power of heating becomes manifest. And when electricity flows through the light bulb, the power of lighting becomes manifest. So if we go back to the me, self, and I map, well, so where would we put the power? Let's talk about a stove. So the stove would be the me, the power of heating would be the soul, and the soul of souls would be electricity. So in living your purpose, the purpose is to live yourself. Who are you? You're a soul. What is a soul? A part of God. The soul, a part of God, has been given a character to play. We've come into this world to be a channel for something about the one self that we all share. That's why it says, love your neighbor as yourself. Most people don't know the ending of that verse. I am Hashem. I am all there ever was, is, and ever will be. I am existence. There's only one I am. Your I am and my I am are facets of, rays of, one shared I am. Our sages teach us that the general principle that all of Torah life revolves around is to love your neighbor as yourself. And interesting, every single detail of the directives of Torah life is in order for us to live that truth of loving our neighbor as ourselves. Now, how can I love my neighbor as myself? Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'll meet him, I don't know. When you realize that yourself and myself, or to be more correct, you don't have a self, you and I are part of one self, we're living our purpose. Every single one of us, no matter whatever part we've been given, every single one of us is to use our character, to use our strengths, and to also use our challenges in order to serve, to bring into this world a greater awareness of the one self that we all share. At Sinai, we met the one self we share. It's not uncommon for people to talk about their calling. They're looking for their calling. And if I want to live my purpose and feel happy, I feel I want to know, what is my calling in life? But the question is, well, who's calling? The Torah makes an outrageous claim. A claim that never before anybody claimed, that never even after our claim did any ever claim. That claim is that there was a revelation at Sinai, and that the entire Jewish people thousands of years ago heard the voice of God. Now, what does that mean to hear the voice of God? Look, I remember the first time I heard the voice of God, and I bet you it was the same time you heard the voice of God. It was I saw the movie, The Ten Commandments. That was the first time I heard the voice of God. I saw the movie, The Ten Commandments. And only later on in my life that I realized, well, what an amazing responsibility that was for the producer and the director to determine the voice of God. You know, I started to think, I wonder what those auditions were like. You know, you're auditioning for the voice of God. And they're sitting there, and a guy walks in, and they give him the script, and he goes, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Oh man, that's Mickey Mouse. We need a God voice. Another guy comes in, they give him the script. He says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. Oh man, that's a used car salesman. We need a God's voice. And then some guy comes in, they give him the script, and he says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. A loud, booming voice. And they say, well, that's it. That's a God voice. I mean, everybody knows that God is from England. I mean, what is a God voice? What did God sound like? The Kabbalah teaches that the voice of God was your voice. The voice of God was your voice. In fact, someone told me in the movie The Prince of Egypt, when they were trying to consider the voice of God, they actually decided that it would be the same voice of Moses, but amplified or enhanced in some way. What does that really mean? Because most people think that what the Torah is describing happening at Sinai was, again, we met this infinite, eternal being that imposed his will on us. He told us what to do. He's telling us what to do. I remember I saw this cartoon. It was a pretty short cartoon. It was called Bambi Meets Godzilla. And I thought there was a crazy kind of name, Godzilla. And basically it was very quick because Bambi is grazing in the field, and then Godzilla's foot steps on Bambi. For a lot of people, the human-divine relationship is a relationship not with God, but maybe with Godzilla. And most people think that what happened at Sinai was some kind of imposition, a foreign being, an alien being. Okay, he's my creator, maybe, but he's telling me what to do. But actually what our tradition and its deepest teachings are telling us is that who we met at Sinai was ourself. Now, not yourself and not myself, not the sum total of ourselves, and not even the whole that's greater than the sum total of the selves, but rather the one self, the whole self, which each and every one of us is a facet of. Remember the metaphor. Each and every one of us is like the part of that branch and that leaf that is unfolding from a root self. And at Sinai, we met ourself. See, most people think that God is imposing his will on us, but rather God is exposing his will through us. In fact, Kabbalah teaches that God didn't speak to the Jewish people, but rather God spoke through the Jewish people. And that was the voice of God, your own voice, to let you know that what the directives of Torah are offering you is a way to come back to yourself as part of a greater self. And that the goal of all of this is to be able to be a channel. We talked about the law of reception. We're here to be like radios, to tune into that sense of one shared self. And therefore, the commandments of the Torah, what most people think they're demandments, they're telling me what to do. They're not demandments, they're commandments, which means that these are directives how together ourselves in cooperation with the one self that we're all part of, to bring that truth into the world. And what is that truth? When you and I know that we're part of one self, then that is the basis of all love. And as I mentioned before, creation is an act of love, from love, for the sake of love. And every detail of the guiding principles and the guiding directives of the Torah are there to help us be ourselves as part of a greater self, channeling that truth into the world and bringing more love and oneness to ourselves and to each other. One of the common things that people share with me is they say, you know, I don't know, there's a God, there isn't a God, it doesn't matter to me. What relevance does God have in my life? I want to have a happy life. This is my life. I feel I should be able to do with it as I please. Well, so that's an interesting claim. This is my life, and I should be able to do with it as I please. Well, let's just check out how much our life is actually our life. So I'm going to ask you all, if you don't mind, a little experiment. I'm going to ask you all for the next, let's say, 20 seconds. I'm going to ask you all to turn off your hearts. I'm going to check the time, and in 20 seconds from now, I'm going to tell you to turn them back on again. Okay, that's like, I think you're all picking up how ridiculous that is. But wait a second, if I can't turn my heart off and on at will, that means that I'm not beating my heart. Because if I were beating my heart, I should be able to turn my heart off and on at will. So if I'm not beating my heart, then who is? Then who is? What about my head? Well, let's try this. I'm going to ask you even for 5 seconds to stop thinking. Okay, go. You see, you can't stop thinking. What do you mean you can't stop thinking? If you just stop thinking and then turn it back on. Well, but if you can't stop thinking, then that means that you're not the source of thinking. Because if you were the source of thinking, if you were the master of thinking, then you should be able to turn it off and on. But you're not. What about free will? How free is will? Let's stop wanting. You know, you can't stop wanting. What you want is your choice. That you want, in that you have no choice. Right this very second, I've been told that there are 17 muscles in my face that have to work in perfect coordination for every syllable to come out of my mouth. Now, I don't even know where there's place in my face for 17 muscles. But frankly, I don't even know how to talk. I don't know how I'm doing this. I don't know how to lift my hands. I don't know how to do anything I'm doing. So how much is this actually me doing what I'm doing? In other words, there was a great Hasidic master who said, every move you make and every breath you take, he's not just watching you. That was the Stinger Rebbe. In other words, when you really experientially get in touch with yourself, you realize how much power, how much really is this your life? How much are the powers within you actually from you? And so when people say to me, you believe, you believe like, how do you feel God in your life? Well, if God is some guy in the sky over there, then I don't feel him in my life. But when I understand God is the higher self, the inner self, the one self that I share with everyone else in the universe, I feel God right this very second, because I realize that every word I say and every thought I think and every move I make, I can't make on my own. What you're witnessing right now is a partnership. And essentially, I am a soul, and I'm playing the character Rabbi David Aaron. But I'm not independent. I'm a soul, part of a soul of all souls. And right now, you're witnessing a partnership. And that is an incredible experience, that you're not alone, but actually you're part of the all one. And we are part of one self, one soul, that is working through us. Friedrich Nietzsche, famous German philosopher, was very famous for saying that God is dead. I actually learned Friedrich Nietzsche in the public bathrooms of New York City, because there on the public bathroom it said, God is dead, Nietzsche. And underneath that it said, Nietzsche's dead, God. So that was my first lesson in Friedrich Nietzsche. But Friedrich Nietzsche is not known for something else that he said. He said, unless you experience an infinite whole working through you, your life has no meaning. What is Friedrich Nietzsche talking about? Who is this infinite whole that's working through you? So as I mentioned before, I don't believe in God, not in the normative sense that people think that God is some guy in the sky over there imposing his will on us. The Kabbalah teaches that God, or if you use the word God, is the one self. We exist within this self. We are part of this self. And that every word we say and every thought we have and every act we do is a partnership, because all the powers within us are not from us. And we want to learn how to make life go live. So imagine this kind of a metaphor. Imagine two radios having a conversation. One radio comes up to his friend and says, you gotta listen, you gotta listen. He kind of tunes himself up and he starts to sing. And he's got the voice of the opera singer Pavarotti. And he says to his friend, listen to me, hey, I'm amazing. Wow, did you hear how, I mean, it took me a while to learn how to sing like that. His friend says to him, he says, hey, man, like, I'm sorry, that's not your voice. What do you mean it's not my voice? He says, look, I'll show you. So his friend tunes himself in, and suddenly the voice of Pavarotti comes through him. Well, his friend looks and says, wow, that's a good fake of me. That's a good imitation of me. How'd you do that? He said, I did it the same way you did it. I tuned into the broadcast. That's not your voice. We're radios. And so too, we were talking about the law of reception before. There is really one self, one soul. Our job as souls, using the character traits we've been given, is to turn on and tune in so that I am Hashem. I am all there ever was, is, and ever will be. There's only one I am. I am the soul of your soul. There's only one soul. That we tune into that broadcast, or in this case, we'll call it the Godcast, and bring into the world that truth that we are all part of one self, one soul, and allow that song of love to come into the world. I read an interesting article that said that the number one fear in the United States is public speaking. The number two fear in the United States is death. That means that if you were asked to give a eulogy, you'd prefer to be in that box. That's Jerry Seinfeld, that's not me. But I don't have a problem with public speaking. Since I'm a child. As a child, I actually aspired to be an actor. And when people would put me up on stage, I felt even more comfortable with more people. It's just a gift. But am I haughty about that gift? I hope I'm not. Because that'd be as silly as me being haughty about me scratching my ear. Did you see that? Yeah. I worked on that. But then I got to this year. That was a whole other level. But, that's as silly as that. Of course you can scratch your ear. You were given the ability to scratch your ear. There's something today, and actually people are studying it, it's called flow. Artists describe it, musicians describe it. I experience flow, whereby very often when I'm giving a talk, I get to a point where I don't feel I'm giving the talk at all. It's almost like a glove. I feel like a glove and a hand entered into me. In fact, in flow, they point out that the word enthusiasm comes from the word thus. Thus means God, and enthuse, like entrance, means the Spirit of God has entered into me, or inspiration. Spirit has come into me. In the spirit of, in the experience of flow, there's a sense of you are an instrument for a power much greater than yourself. And artists experience and have described how they don't feel that they're the artist anymore. They feel that they're the paintbrush, and something just happens to them. And they sit down and it's just something happens to them or through them. Or I met a fellow who's a very well-known screenwriter, and I shared these ideas with him. He said, Rabbi, I'm going to tell you something I never shared with anybody before. When I come into my office to write a new film, I feel so crazy. I feel stupid. I don't know how to write. Now, around me are awards of films that I wrote, and yet I don't feel that I wrote any of these films. And I have a prayer that I have every time I walk into my office. I say, please, God, use me. Because he said, honestly, Rabbi, I didn't write any of these films. I'm just a vehicle. I'm just an instrument for God. And that's actually what the Kabbalah describes as what's called a Merkava. That great people aspire to be a Merkava. A Merkava is a vehicle, whereby a channel, whereby by the Creator, as we mentioned before with Friedrich Nietzsche, the infinite whole works through us. This is the experience of the art of flow. In order to really live a purposeful, meaningful life, we want to understand that this is a partnership. We want to understand that we want to live in service. So here you got this soul, my friend, who's playing the character, a playwright. And he's a screenwriter. That's the character he's playing. He's been given, obviously, the gift of writing. I've been given the gift of speaking. But really, what is it about? It's about if he, as a soul, chooses to use his writing skills in service of bringing more of the one soul in the world. And that would mean that all his films would in some way promote love, peace, harmony, mutual understanding, a depth of empathy. But that's what it means to live a purposeful life. When you are a vehicle to bring a greater consciousness of the one self that we are all part of, using your talents in order to do that, and bringing more and more that sense of oneself, that is the key, and that is the foundation of bringing more into the world, the truth of love. We spoke earlier on that creation is an act of love. Creation is a story of love. Creation is a song of love. We are like radios. Our job is to tune into the one self and channel into the world and experience that we are one. We're not one and the same. I'm not you, you're not me. But we really are one. And everybody in the field that they're in should always learn to aspire to serve, to bring that greater sense of God is one. There's none but the one. There's only one self, only one soul. I'm someone, you're someone. And together we can bring the one into the world in our unique ways. I met this musician, actually a very accomplished musician, who played with some of the most well-known musicians in the world. And I asked him a question. I've been told that there's a lot of drugs in the world of music and a lot of drinking and alcohol in the world of music. And why is that? And he said, I'll tell you why. He said, when these young artists start off, what are they waiting for? They're waiting for flow. They're waiting for that inspiration, enthusiasm. They literally experience the peak performance is when I'm not playing. He said when he was up there with his guitar, he didn't feel that this is his song or this is his talent. He didn't feel he was playing it. He felt he was being played through. And he didn't feel that the band was a separate bunch of guys. You know, if you ever see these jazz bands and they're just, you know, doing improv, it's like unbelievable. They're just so in sync. They're so one with each other because they are literally channels for the one self, the one soul God to come in the world and play through them and become more present and bring more harmony and oneness in the world and love. So he said these artists, these musicians at the beginning of their career, that's the moment they wait for. It's this service, this feeling of being possessed by power greater than themselves that seeks to work through them and become present in the world by them. And that is their peak performance, and that's their ultimate moment. But what happens when they get off stage? People start clawing at them. People start begging them for their signature and and their autograph. And suddenly their ego kicks in and they start to think, this is me, this is my strength, this is my power, this is my song, I did this is all about me. I call that misery. That's a person who got lost in their character. Yeah, you're playing the character of a musician, but you're a soul. And a soul is a part of the soul of all souls. And you as a soul are meant to be a channel for the soul of all souls to work through you and the character that you're playing and do a service to bring greater self. But what happens is when you disconnect from the soul of all souls and you get lost in your me, and you start to think, I am my character, and this is all about me and my fame, and all I want to do is get my name out there. You know, you go to the Oscars and they say, well, there's some big names here tonight. It's not about art, it's not about my name. There's only one name that I want to be building out there. It's the name Yud Hey Vav Hey, the one self, the one soul of all of us, the basis of us all. And so he says, so what kicks in is their ego, and suddenly their ego is as thick as a brick. And so what happens is, why is there so much drugs and alcohol? Is because when they go on stage, they know that they got to surrender their ego. They've got to let go. I mean, one of my things is I'm not playing a musician so much, this character, but I do some music, and I was sitting at my piano. I was just kind of fiddling around, which is a weird thing to do on a piano, the fiddle. And then suddenly a song came out, and my wife came out of the kitchen and says, what is that song? I said, I don't know, I'm just trying to stay out of the way. To be in that creative moment, to be in service, you got to get the ego out of the way. Because the ego stands for edging God out, E-G-O, edging God out. And so what happens is when the ego kicks in and they edge out God, which was really the basis of all the creativity, so then they start drinking and they start taking drugs. You want to kind of loosen up and get into the flow. But really, that's not a musician anymore. That's not an instrument for God anymore. That's just some drunk guy on stage. And he said that's the beginning of the end of most of these musicians. Same thing with artists. Artists will describe this experience of flow where they feel like, I didn't paint that picture. Now, I was in the home of a fellow in Los Angeles, a mansion. He had an incredible collection of art. What was interesting about this art is that none of them were signed. And I asked him about this. He said, well, a lot of great artists don't sign their works because they don't feel it's theirs. They don't feel they can put their name on it. They feel that they were a channel. They were just a radio. They feel that that beauty was there, and what they succeeded in doing is becoming a channel for that beauty in the world. But what happens is this guy, he starts to paint, and then suddenly he feels possessed, and hours go by, it feels like seconds. He transcends time. He doesn't drink, he doesn't sleep, and after 5 hours or 10 hours, he looks at his watch, he can't believe it. I thought this was just 5 minutes, and there he is, and he's utterly astonished at the work in front of him, and he just feels like, wow, thank you. And then somebody walks up and says, wow, that's amazing, did you do that? I said, no, I'm just a channel, I'm a paintbrush. Well, he said, you did do that, didn't you? Well, he said, well, why don't you put your name on it? Well, yeah, maybe I should sign it. And then somebody else comes up and said, well, did you do that? I see that's your name. Yeah, you did that. The guy says, well, yeah, I did. I mean, a little help from above. Another person walks by and looks at the painting and says, wow, did you do that? The guy said, well, yeah, don't you see my name there? Another guy comes and says, you do that? Says, yeah, what do you think? I'm one of the greatest artists in the world. Of course, what do you think? That's my work. You see, that's when ego kicks in. Are you on an ego trip or are you on a soul journey? Because when you're on a soul journey, you want that flow. You want to be in service. You don't want to build your name. You want to build the one name that we're all a part of. There is a series on MTV about rock bands, and it went off very quickly because what basically happened is the rock story was the same for a lot of these bands. They worked really hard, they finally got a break, they got an album, then it did well, and then they started going to these big concerts, and then they started to do drugs, and then they broke up and they're not doing music anymore. A lot of these shows were the same story for a lot of these bands. Because when you don't live in service, when you don't feel that you have a higher purpose, when you're not living a holy life means a life that is wholly and completely committed to living your purpose. What is your purpose? You are a soul. You've been given strengths and talents. Your purpose is to be a channel for oneself, one soul in the world, to bring more love, more harmony, more peace, more compassion. Is this an ego trip or a journey of the soul? There's an amazing story that I heard about Viktor Frankl. You might have heard of Viktor Frankl. He wrote one of the most important books ever written, and one of the most important books I've ever read is Man's Search for Meaning. And Viktor Frankl, who was a survivor of the Holocaust, described a story where the Nazis had rounded up the Jews. He was Jewish. And his life's journey, his life's mission, he felt, was to be a psychologist and to help, mental well-being. And he developed something called logotherapy. And so they were all rounded up by the Nazis, and they were in this lineup, and there was this Nazi there holding up his hand and going like this, you to the right, you to the left, you to the right. And everybody knew those that go that way, they're going to the gas chamber. That's the end of their life. And everyone going that way, they're on their way to a work camp. Well, Viktor Frankl was selected by this one guy's finger to go to a work camp. And they were put into this room, and a Nazi soldier walked in and said, everybody strip and throw everything you have, all your clothing and all your possessions, whatever you have on you and with you, throw into the middle of the room. You have 2 minutes. Well, everybody starts ripping off their clothing. If you don't finish in 2 minutes, I will shoot you. And everybody's throwing everything they have into the center of the room. Viktor Frankl ripped off his clothing, but he had with him an attaché case with all the writings and all the research he had done through so many years of his career. This was his life's work was in this attaché case. So he's stripped himself naked, that he runs up to the Nazi and he says, listen, I've thrown everything I have into this pile, but just this is just a bunch of papers that have no value to you. It's just some of my work. It has no value. And the Nazi soldier is listening as if he's being empathetic. And then he looks at him, he takes his gun, he says, I'll shoot you. Throw it into the pile. Viktor Frankl describes how he threw now everything into the pile. His life's work, his whole identity was all that, and he threw that into the pile. They then gave everybody these uniforms, these garments from, they could tell these were old garments of people who once were here, no longer, and everybody's wearing these striped, clothing of the camp. And he walks outside. He's just stripped naked. He's just his naked existence. No clothing, no property, no nothing. His entire career and all his research was thrown away. He let go of it all. He reaches into the pocket and he feels a little piece of paper in the pocket. And it's the Shema. He realizes that the last person, who's probably no longer alive, who wore these clothing, had cherished this little piece of paper ripped out from a prayer book. It was the Shema, hear Israel, God our God is one. And Viktor Frankl said, I had to throw everything into the pile. I had to let go of everything to be able to find the Shema. What is the Shema? You know, most people think that the Shema, hear Israel, God our God, God is one. It's just, monotheism, Torah teaches there's one God. But if that's true, if the Shema was only saying there's one God, then it just should say there's one God. Just say there's one God. But it doesn't say that. It says hear Israel, contemplate this. Yud Kei Vav Kei, which means existence. All there ever was, is, and ever will be, is our God, Eloheinu, the soul of your soul, and is one existence, Hashem Echad. When I was a kid, I thought that basically what it means is there's one God. Like in the category of gods, there's just one God. Now in the category of people, there are a billion of them. Category of insects, there's billions and billions and billions of them. But in the category of gods, only one God gets into that category, and you don't get into that category. So there is one God, but that's not what the Shema is teaching. The Shema is an affirmation, not that there, somewhere over there, is this one being in the category of gods. The Shema is saying, not there is one God, but God is one. There's none but the one, and you are some of the one. Shema Yisrael is saying, here, there's one reality, one existence. That's Yud Hey Vav Hey. Eloheinu, He's the soul of our soul. I do exist. And yet, I exist within and a part of Hashem Echad, this one soul. And then after it says, and you shall love God your God. Well, how can I be commanded to love God? I mean, maybe I will, maybe I won't, and we'll go out and we'll spend some time together. How do I love God, some infinite being somewhere over there? Because when you have an infinite being over there, every step towards the infinite leaves an infinite journey. You'll never get to the infinite over there. But when you realize that God is the one self, the one soul, the one reality, and that you don't exist alongside of Him, but you exist as a part of Him, at one with Him. So that's what love is. Love is an emotion. Now, when I'm commanded to love God or commanded to love my neighbor, I'm not commanded to feel something. Nobody can command you to feel something. It's to act in a way that will allow you to tune into something. And what is that? That one reality, that one self that we all share, which we call God. And so this is what it's about. To live your purpose is to be a soul, taking the character traits and the character and the role you've been given in order to serve, to channel, to bring greater Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. God is one. We are one with God. There is none but the one. We're someone. We're one with God. We're one with each other through God. And then we feel that love in our hearts for that feeling of connection. We're all looking for connection. And that's because it's there. Now we have to tune into it. You might be familiar with the Abraham story, the beginning of our national purpose. And each and every one of us needs to find our particular purpose, which we'll be talking about in upcoming talks. Abraham is mentioned in the Torah with no credentials. There's really no background about him. He's really pretty much some stranger that appears in the Bible. And then out of nowhere, the Torah describes that God speaks to Abraham and says to Abraham, Lech lecha, go to you. Lech lecha, go to you. It's very strange. Go to you. That's the beginning of the journey. Go to you. And yet, the continuation of is leave your country, your birthplace, your family, to a land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation. And I will bless you. And you will be a blessing. To you will be blessing. Not that you'll be blessed, but More than that, you will be a blessing to all of mankind. Well, that doesn't make any sense. How do you say to somebody, go to yourself, go to you, and then tell them to leave yourself? Because what is the foundation of most people's sense of self? It's my family. It's my city. I'm from the family of Aaron. I grew up in Toronto, Canada. I'm a Canadian. I mean, and how do I become a great nation? By leaving my family. And generally, to become a great nation, you kind of, you stay involved with your family and your community. You lobby, some support. You build your way up in the country. You become the president or whatever. How do you say to somebody, leave yourself? Go to yourself by leaving yourself. Now, it's clear that this is not about geography, because it's in the wrong order. If it was about geography and God was giving him some map, then God would say to Abraham, first you leave your family, then you leave your place of birth, and then you leave your country. It doesn't say that. It says, leave your country, your birthplace, and your family. It's clearly not in the geographical order. It's clearly in the order of psychological difficulty. Abraham was being asked to let go of what is the basis of most people's sense of self. Let go of all of that. Well, how do you go to yourself? By letting go of all of it. You see, Abraham was on a journey to the soul, because he was being asked to let go of the character traits that most people base their self-worth on, their family, their birthplace, their country. He was being asked to let go of that. Well, what will happen when I let go of that? Well, God says, and I will make you a great nation. I will bless you. See, Abraham was tuning into the I. That's how he became a great nation, by tuning into the I. That's the purpose of it all. When you as a soul can sometimes you need to act out a character. In his case, it was quite extreme. He had to let go of his character in order to found a new identity, one which is completely anchored in and determined by my connection to God. And God says, and you will be a blessing. Not you will be blessed, but you will be a blessing. The sages tell us that you will be a channel of blessing. You'll be the light that'll turn on the world. You'll bring everybody to this one God, this one self. We'll all be united again. We won't be fighting. You got your God, I got my God beat your God beat me, God. No, there's only one self, there's only one soul. We're all facets. If God were the white light, we'd all be different colors in the spectrum of that one light. You, Abraham, your purpose is to bring the one soul, the one self-consciousness to the world. Bring back love to the world, connection to the world. Bring that all back. That was his journey. That's what he was all about. The Jewish people have had a lot of soul training, because we've lost everything. We've been thrown out of our country. We've been thrown out of our cities. Our possessions have been confiscated. We've lost our homes. We've lost everything. We've lost our families. In so many ways, what everyone was asked to do has happened to us. We've had to let go. Now, what happens when you take a Frenchman and he's thrown out of France? How long does he stay a Frenchman? But the Jewish people have been scattered throughout the world without a land. And we've lost our families over and over again. We've been in training to create a sense of identity on the I. And I will make you a great nation. My life service is to bring more of that sense of the one I that we're all a part of. So Mark Twain, you've probably heard this very famous quote from Mark Twain in Harper's Magazine. Mark Twain says, what is the secret of the Jews? He said, all forces pass, but the Jew is immortal. What is the secret of his immortality? Leo Tolstoy also marveled over the Jews and their amazing ability to not just survive, but thrive. That's what's amazing about it. And Leo Tolstoy says that the Jew is the embodiment of eternity. What does that mean? You're a soul. You've been given a character to play. Don't get lost in your character. Use your character. Use it in service. But you as a soul are a part of the soul of all souls. And your job, like a radio, in the law of reception, is to tune into that one self and channel into the world. That one self that we all share. That's our national purpose. Each and every one of us needs to find our particular purpose. We'll be talking about that soon. The Torah describes Moses as the greatest prophet ever. No prophet has ever come close to what Moses was able to tune into and channel and reveal in the world. But let's look at the story of how Moses became this huge prophet. You're probably familiar with the story that the king of Egypt does this horrible decree whereby he wants every Jewish baby boy to be thrown into the Nile. He murdered thousands and thousands of thousands. Well, Moses' mother, she realizes that, she's got to do something. She's got a baby and they're going to throw him into the Nile. So his mother creates this little boat, this kind of floating cradle, and puts him in the Nile. And what could she do? She doesn't know what his future will be, but she cannot bear to see an Egyptian murder her child. So with hopes of who knows what, she puts the child in the river. Now, what happens? The very daughter of Pharaoh comes walking by, and she sees this little baby, floating in the river. She reaches out and takes his baby. Now, she knows this is a Jew. She must know this is a Jew. This is an amazing story. She takes him home and basically, realizes, well, she can't nurse him. Well, it turns out that Miriam, which was Moses' sister, she's watching and she thinks something's got to happen. She just believes something's going to happen. And sure enough, that's when Pharaoh's daughter walks by and saves this little boy, takes him home. Well, she needs someone to nurse this baby. Miriam says to Pharaoh's daughter, I could get somebody to nurse the baby. So Miriam gets Moses' mother, and it turns out that Pharaoh's daughter is paying Moses' mother to nurse her own son while he's being raised in the palace of the king of Egypt, getting a royal education. Moses is the prince of Egypt. But Moses knows he's Jewish, and he feels this deep identification. He feels a oneness of his soul with the soul of his people. And he can't bear to see out the window the suffering that's being, the oppressive suffering that's happening from the Egyptians to the Jews. And he goes out there and he sees an Egyptian hitting a Jew. And he cannot see this. He cannot let this happen. And so to save the Jew, he kills the Egyptian and he buries the Egyptian. Now, this is his first day out of the palace, and he's already committed murder. I mean, in our books, that's not murder. He was saving someone from murder. You'd think that after that, he'd stay in the palace and stop looking out the window, but he can't. He feels that oneness of his soul with the oneness of his people. Even though he's so different, and yet deep inside, he feels he's so one. He goes out again, and this time he sees two Jews fighting. He sees one Jew about to hit another Jew. And he says, "How can you do that to your brother?" Well, they say to him, "Who appointed you as the ruler of us? Who are you, you big shot? What are you going to do, kill me like you killed that Egyptian?" Moses says, "Oh my gosh, I saved a Jew, and he went finking on me and starts telling everybody else that I killed an Egyptian." So he realizes this is bad news. It's all out. And sure enough, it gets to the king. And the king says, "Okay, we got to put an order of killing Moses." Well, Moses now runs away from Egypt. And he goes to the desert. And there he meets a Midianite woman. And he ends up marrying a Midianite woman of a Midianite family was excommunicated from Midian. And so now you've got this Israelite, Moses, who was raised as the prince of Egypt. He was a prince. Now he's a fugitive. He's got a price on his neck. Before he was in the royal palace, now he's somewhere in the desert as a shepherd, And so who am I? What an identity crisis Moses went through. Am I a prince or am I a fugitive? Am I a Jew? Am I an Egyptian? Am I a Midianite? Am I a prince or am I a shepherd? And that's when the Torah records, in the midst of this breakdown, Moses says, and he names his son Gershom, and he says, I am a stranger in a strange land. That's when he has his first revelation of God. He meets the self in the burning bush. That's how you become a huge prophet. See, once again, Moses is a man who, as a soul, was playing a character. He was playing a Jew, and yet he was told, well, you're a prince of Egypt. And then suddenly, in the crashing of everything around him, he has this moment where he transcends all this as a soul. And he connects to the soul of all souls. And he starts to hear the voice of God. And he realizes his mission. His mission, which is each and every one of us has this mission. Again, to tune into the voice of the one self that we all share. And hear what is it that we have to do. You know, in the Shema it says, V'hayayim shemoa tishma'u. If you listen to my commandments, you will hear. What will you hear? The commandment that I will command you today. When we tune into the one self, we hear that one soul speaking to us, guiding us in the unique way that we should be guided in order to live our purpose, to fulfill our meaning, to whatever unique way we are here, to bring and channel the one self, the one soul, and spread acts of kindness, of compassion, acts of mutual respect. That's how you become a huge prophet and hear the voice of the higher self, the inner self, the one self that you share with all people.